Hello, Alex Lafkus here. It's been a few years since I've dove in and talked about sink tips, so we're going to do that today as I find myself, fishing some different stuff. As new lines come out, I like to play with them and try a few different things. So let's just kind of go through how I'm rigging each rod and why I'm using which line. So basically, with my 6 weights, um, these will work on fives too, but I've run the Rio Premier 150s. It's a pretty supple runner, so that's nice. The sink rates on the 150 and 200 of the Premier 24-foot sink tips is a little less than what you start finding in their 250, 300, and up. So I really like, it says the 150 is a type 4, the 200 is a type 5. The other ones are type 6s. So those ones seem to work good for me in a lot of situations doing my 6 weight stuff, as I'm not, a lot of our rivers we're fishing in Michigan, I'm not trying to penetrate the water column as much as I am, is perhaps you would be out west. So the type 4 and stuff seems to be about right for what I'm doing. Now, if I want a lighter line that's going to land with less impact, what I've been doing, this also works good in shallow water, like in our summer situations and whatnot. I'm running the, disregard the number on the bottom, but these are the SA Sonar Titan triple densities, the I23, which is portion intermediate type 2 type 3 sink tip. I've actually really liked these. They're have a little less aggressive taper than the Rio Predator series, which I'm a fan of. So I've been using a lot more of the I23s when I'm doing a lot of my streamer stuff in a bit shallower water. So I'm running my 6. I've got a spool with the 150 and a spool with the I23. That kind of covers me in both situations. Now, as I move to a 7 weight, I'm doing the 24-foot tip like I've got here. And in the Premiers, like I said before, that's a type 5. And a triple density I23 in the 7 weight as well. That's worked really good for me in like I said, the shallower stuff, plus the 200. I run that 200 a lot with, like, if I'm using small deer hair stuff like cougars, whatnot. That's worked really well. Now, as we get up into 8 weight stuff, that's where I'm running a lot, probably a bigger variation in lines. I use them a lot in the winter, the 8 weights. Now, the Premier Series Rios are pretty supple, so I do like those. Now, when I start switching into the 8 weights, I'm running usually 3 to 4 different lines I have ready to go. Just because I find myself fishing more variation of situation as I'm on the white, and I'm really adjusting to flows throughout the day. So I'm going to end up loaded with all 3, and spot to spot it really varies. And using the jet boat down there, as I change location, a lot of times I'm changing my line I'm using as well. So what I typically have is either the Rio Premier in a 250 to 300. Now that's going to sink a lot faster, so I'm looking for the right depth and pace. Other than that, I also, in cold weather, the Sonar Sink 25 Cold is an excellent line. It's an extremely supple runner. So when it starts getting real cold, and I'm talking like, sub 50, 40-degree air temps, 30s, stuff like that, the Sink 25 Cold is really pliable. It's a very soft runner. I like that in that cold weather. Now, the drawback to it is when it does get hot out, it's going to knot more. It's going to twist on that first guide on your rod and whatnot. So this is a big time cold weather line for me, as it says in the label. My 8s, I'll be running like a 250, maybe a 300, depending on how much wind, how big the fly, how the angler is casting. Personally, I use a lot of 250s on my 8s. But it's an excellent line in the really cold weather. It doesn't seem to sink as fast as the RIO Striper, which I'm still running a lot. So if I have a little bit more moderate pace, or I'm fishing a weighted fly, the sink cold 25 is ideal. You know, if I'm getting higher water and it needs something that's getting down, you can try some of the other sonar triple densities. Like I said, this is an I23. I think they make I know they make a 357, and they make another one in between, which might be like an I35. I would guess the I35 is more of the number. I fished the 357, and it's a rock. So that's not something I like to fish a lot. I incorporate a lot of pauses in my casting. Therefore, a lot of times if you don't have really fast pace of current, those lines are going to find the rocks on the bottom of the river. So my 8 weights are going to be rigged, say, at 250 in the sink 25 cold, a 250 or 300 in the RIO Striper. Also the I23 Sonar Titan, which I like, once again, long casts over shallow water. The I23 has been really ideal. Now, if it's kind of tweener, I'm using a lot of the line that actually SA is going to be coming out with this year, which is it's a sink 25 cold, but it's a type 3. So this is going to be a little bit more sink rate because it's a longer head with a bigger of type 3 sink tip. So it's going to sink a little more than the I23. The other advantage on this line that will be coming out this year is that it's that same sink 25 cold runner. So it's super supple. So in really cold weather and stuff, the I23 and these Titans in the tungsten, the triple density lines, they're a little stiffer runner. Now, not too stiff to fish when it's really cold, but it is stiffer than what comes on the sink 25 cold type 3s and standard. You know, I guess it says sink 7 on the 350. Probably a little different on the 250 and 300. So those are some of the options. Keep that in mind. You know, my 9 weights, once again, it's set up like the 8 weights, maybe a 350 striper depending on situation, or just a 300 striper, an I23, a 300 type 3 sink 25. I'm more 250s on 8s, 300s on 9s for the most part. Some 350s on 9s depending on what I'm doing, and a sink 25 cold in a 250 or a 300, or on the 9s a 300 or a 350. What you're going to find is if you get heavy winds and you're throwing big flies, that 350 on a 9 is going to carry that better than the 300. So I make sure I always have that. We deal with a lot of wind, especially in the winters down there on the White, and I'm sure you do out west as well. Even every time of year, and a lot of times having that extra grain weight will just help propel it. But that's when you're going about selecting a sink tip, those are things to think about. There's a lot of options out there, and they do different things. Now, at $110 a line, I know you don't want to be spending, owning 4 fly lines, but owning 2 wouldn't be a bad idea. Maybe something more moderate sink rate, and then something a little heavier sink, or, more of a warm weather, cold weather line, depending on when you're fishing. I do find that the frustrations with a stiffer runner of the knotting and stuff and coiling when it's really cold will drive you crazy. So that's where I'm kind of leaning more into the Premiers and the Sink 25s. The Sink 25 Type 3 is going to be a huge addition. People are going to really like it. Super easy casting line. I have a lot of clients that can really gun this line that struggle with some other stuff, which is nice. So let me know if you've got any other questions. Frankly, these are the lines I use. I use SA. I use RIO. I have used some of the airflows in the past. I find that they sink too fast for what I like to do. They don't not. They're great at that. But the way I fish, it's too much fall. Doesn't allow for enough of the stalling of the fly. The Cortlands that I have used in the past, and it's been a few years, haven't really, I've always had problems with their runners. It's just, they're not as supple, not as angler friendly, and when you're out there grinding, you want it in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. So that's why I stick with these, and I pick them based on what I'm using that day. It's a lot based on water conditions, air temperature. So, well, one of my hounds needs out, but let me know any questions, please. Any questions, just leave them in the comments. I'll make sure to get back to you. But once again, sink tips do get a little tricky. So hopefully some of this cleared some of that up for you. Click the like, subscribe. Appreciate it. Keeps me motivated. And I'm going to try to stay on this a little bit better. Thanks.